Okay. Um, so we're on Daf Gimel Amid Beis. So we just talked about how Hordus had embalmed the last daughter of the Chashmonaim, so he could claim that he was from the base Chashmonaim. Amar, Man Dorish Mikev Achecha Tosam Melech HaMelech. Rabbanan, who is the one? The Hordus said to himself, who do I got to worry about now? He said, who's the one who says that you can a melech of the Yidden can only come from the Yidden? Sagt the Gemara. He says, so Hordus said, it must be the Chachamim, the Rabbanan. They're the ones who are going to say it. Come katlinu the kul Rabbanan. So therefore, he killed all the Rabbanan so that there wouldn't be this possible rebellion or a disparagement of his malchus. But he kept one Rav in order to be able to have who to ask a question from, which is a age-old story with the Yidden, right? They would always send away the Yidden, but they'd always keep a few, the advisors, either directly for their money or to have someone who's not an idiot to tell them what to do. Ahadele klila daili nakrinu le'ene. He gave him a crown of porcupine quills, and he poked out his eyes. It's very interesting how I hope you don't mind Rashi, the top Rashi, how Rashi describes a porcupine. Hanka metargin and yala, but who sheretz shekayrin hartzen. It's a rodent that's called a hartzen. Usari kasha. Its skin is very tough. Kemachten, like needles. But also le'ateres ma'oiroi. He made a crown out of its skin, around his eyes, and it poked out his eyes. And he did that to Bava and Buta in order that he shouldn't be able to conspire against him. Yumachad Asab Yasab Kame. So Hordus tried to entrap Bava and Buta. He sat in front of him, and Bava and Buta couldn't see who he was talking to. Hordus said to him, in the guise of a regular person, look at this debased Eved, look what he's up to. Amalei Maya Evidle. So Bava Muda said, what do you want me to do about it? Amalei Niltaya. So Hordus said, you should curse him. Niltaya Mar. Amalei Ksiv Gamba B'madacha Melech Altikal. Even when you are just thinking about it to yourself, you shouldn't be Makala Melech. Amalei Hailav Melechu. So Hordus said to him, but he's not a Melech, he's really an Eved. Amalei V'lahavi Asher Ba'amot Ksiv. Even in your sleeping chambers, you should not be makal, you should not curse an usher. And Hordus was certainly an usher. So Hordus said to him, and he said, so I'm sorry, so Bava and Buddha said, even if he wasn't an usher, even if he's just a nasi, even just he's a leader, it says a nasi should not be cursed. Amalei, so Hordus said back to him, Hordus said, why are you applying that pasuk of Nasi Ba'amcha? He's not Oisa Ma'isa Amcha. He doesn't follow the rules. Amalei mistapina minei. Bava Buddha said, I'm scared of him. I don't want to say anything about him because I'm scared of the repercussions. Amalei leka inish to azil. The laymalei. So Hordus said to him, there's no one around, no one just besides you and me. As the old phrase goes, two people can keep a secret if one of them is dead. But Hordus was trying to entrap him. It's only the two of us sitting here. The birds will tell over a secret, and the winged creatures will tell over. Finally, Hordus dropped the pretense and he said, it's me. I'm Hordus. I wouldn't know the Rabbanan was so careful. I wouldn't have been, if I would have seen how respectful they are of the Malchus, I wouldn't have killed all of them. So he asked Bava Buta, what should I do to get a kapara for it? Dahu gavra for myself. You extinguished the light of the world. The siv kiner mitzvah of Torah is considered ar, and you killed all the Rabbanim. You should rekindle the light of the world. The Beis Hamikdash would provide light for all the nations. So by rebuilding the Beis Hamikdash had needed renovations. He said, if you rebuild it, if you renovate it, then you'll be Mekayim of light, providing light to make up for the light that you extinguished. You blinded the eyes of the world. So the Rabbanim are considered the Einei Eda, the eyes of the nation. You should involve yourself in the eyes of the world. They were machal. They desecrated my mikdash goy nuschem, your pride, mechmad einechem, that which is precious in your eyes. It's not a precise. It's not saying that it's mechmad einechem. It's not that saying that the mikdash is einechem, but even so. Amalei mistapin b'malchusa. Hurdas told Bava and Buta, how can I rebuild the Beis Hamikdash? I'm just a vassal of Rome, and Rome is going to object. Amalei shader shlicha. You should send a shliach to ask if you could do so. V'lezel shasa. Let him take a year to get there. V'liyakov shasa, and let him spend a year in Rome. V'lahadar shasa, and let him return for a year. Ada v'hachi sashalei u'banisalei. And while this shliach is asking, you could knock it down and rebuild it. Avad hachi, he followed his advice. Sholchulei. And when the messenger came to Rome, they sent back, if you didn't knock it down, heard this, don't knock it down. And if you did destroy it, don't rebuild it. And if you already knocked down and built it, because they were savvy to what he was up to. You're a debased eved, that after you do something, then you go and ask if you're allowed to do it. In Zaincha Alecha, even though you might have your weapons, Safarcha in Zaincha Alecha, Safarcha kan v'leiraka b'leibaka v'leiraka barak. Even though you might have your weapons, we have you the Svarim, the Sifrei Yichos, and you are neither a Rachel or a Ben Rach, which is a way of saying you're not a son of nobility. You're not of noble blood, and we know what you are. You're a good for nothing who does first and asks permission later. Hordis. I'm sorry, Baraka. Hordis Avda Klanya Misavid. He's a freed avid. My Raka. What does it mean? Raka Malchusa. I am today a Rach and a Mashuach Melech. They called him Avrech. That was when it was talking about I think it was Avram or Yaakov. No, that's not it. No, Ches. Yaakov Oisai b'Markeves HaMishnah Shalev Yikol Lefonav Arich and Osan Esel Kol Haaretz Mitzrayim. Talking about Yosef. I'm sorry. Amar Mishalei Ra Binyan heard this Ra Binyan Na Miyamach. Whoever didn't see this binyan that heard this built never saw a beautiful building. But my banya, how do you build it? Amar Rabba Avnei Shisha Umerma. He built it with white marble and with green marble. Ikad Amri Ba'avnei Kuchla Shisha Umerma, with blue and green and white marble. Apik Shaf of Ayel Shaf was built with one brick indented and one brick sticking out. By doing that, they were able to put the cement in the indentations instead of putting it in between the bricks, and it made it more seamless. He wanted to cover it with gold. The Rabban said to him, leave it. It's better to do it like this. The Mercy ki it looks like the waves of the ocean. How is Bava and Buta able? How is he allowed to give advice to this Melech to Hurdas? Why did Daniel get a oinish? Because he gave an eitzah to Nebuchadnezzar. He was assisted essentially Russia. Shneimar lehen malchi malchi yishaper olecha. This Melech Malchi Yishaber Alecha, you're going to go help him, V'chatacha B'tzedakah Proik, and his avoinus with tzedakah, he's going to pay back. Visa b'meichen anyon, and your avoinus will be erased with aniyim. Hein tahavi archa l'shalveisecha. That will cause that you're going to have a long shalom. So essentially, Nebuchadnezzar obviously was a terrible Rasha, and he had a dream that he was going to be punished. So Daniel told him, by doing tzedakah, this pasuk, he said that it's going to help you, that you're going to push off the punishment. Uksiv, kula mata al Nebuchadnezzar malka, that the entire punishment was going to go on Nebuchadnezzar. Uksiv, first came after 12 months. Because he listened to Daniel's advice and did the tzedakah, that pushed off his punishment. So in any case, we have a question. So how could Bava ben Buta give an eitzah to Hurdis, who was a tremendous Rasha? We see by Daniel that he was punished for helping out Nebuchadnezzar. You could say that Bava ben Buta was allowed to help Hurdis because Hurdis was a Eved. And an Eved Knani. An Eved Knani is Mechlev mitzvahs. So by telling him to do a mitzvah, you're telling him what he has to do. That's a yid, no matter how bad he is, to encourage him to do mitzvahs is always a good thing. Basha Enki Nebuchadnezzar, giving him eitzah how to do a mitzvah, he's a guy, you're just helping him avoid his punishment. Different because he gave Hurdis an eitzah to build the Beis HaMikdash. If not for a melech, it would never get rebuilt. How do we know that Daniel was punished for giving an eitzah to Nebuchadnezzar to give tzedakah? It says that Esther called to Hasach. Amarav Hasach is Daniel, and Hasach is Daniel. According to Man, he was called Hasach because he was cut down from his eminence. So that was his punishment. That he was called Asaf just because everything came through him. What was his punishment? So like we all know, that Daniel was thrown into the den of lions. So that was its punishment that he received for giving an eitzah to Nebuchadnezzar. So we said in the Mishnah.
But then he survived?
Daniel? Yeah, right. But it's still not fun to be thrown into the den of lions. Even if you survive, it's not. That was a punishment. Yeah, it was very stressful. The whole thing. Right? He got captured. He was put in jail, and he was thrown into the lions. Even though the Bansham saved him, it's not fun. So we said in the Mishnah, Hakol Kaminig Hamadina. Everything you have to build when two people agree to split up their property, they have to build a wall in between, and the wall has to be built. What does that come to tell you? We had listed different types of stones and bricks. So we're saying even a place where the minig is to just use branches and palm fronds, like our lulav fronds, that they would build a very flimsy fence. Even so, they both have to contribute to it. So Mishnah continued, said since the halacha is that both people have to contribute to the fence, therefore if it falls down, they both are entitled to half of the construction debris and half of the space. What does he have to tell you that for? Of course, how else should you divide it? So we're talking about where it fell onto one side. Or even someone cleared it into his own rishus. I might say that if the other guy says, give me half of it, and this guy says, you know what, I built the whole fence, even though we don't have any Adam for it, and generally the rule is that they both have to chip in, but maybe he should be Kamash Malon, that since the din is so strong, there's an Alan Sadi, there's almost like an Adis, that they would always split it. One person can't say that since it's my Rishus, I don't have to, I don't have to chip in. I don't have to give you half of it. We are on Daf Daled Amud Aleph, about 14 lines up. V'chein be'gina, at the beginning of the line. V'chein be'gina makom shenaga ligda machayv meisei. So Lashon of the Mishnah was a little bit hard to understand. We said first that in a chatzar, both people have to chip in, and neither one can force the other one. And then we said, B'chein begina, makom shenagu ligda machayv meisei. In a gina, makom shenagu ligda, you are machayv them. If they agree to split, then one person can force the other one to chip in. Avol bebika, but a bika, which is a regular field, not a garden where they don't do vegetables. There's not as much living in it. Malkum shenagu loy ligder ein mechayv. And I say, if it's a malkum shenagu shaloi ligder, you're not mechayv. So the Gemara asked the obvious question. It's not very clear what this is saying. So Zak Gemara hagufa kasha amet v'chein begina malkum shenagu ligder mechayv. And I say, we said in the garden, if it's a makom shenagu ligdar, if the general rule is that if the people in that place do build a wall, so then each one can be mechayiv the other one, hastama. But if it wasn't a makom shenagu, ein mechayiv neisai. We don't force him. Ein maseifa, avol bika makom shenagu shal ligdar, ein mechayiv neisai. Hastama mechayiv neisai. There it's mashma that the stam min hastam, you are mechayiv him to build a wall. Now there's more reason to build a wall in a gina than in a sada. Gina is near the town. There's more people living in it. As a sada is all the way outside. So it doesn't make sense to say that stam by a sada you do have to build a wall and not by a gina. Hashta stam gina amrit loy stam amrit loy stam bika mibaya. If we say stam gina, you don't have to build a wall. Certainly a stam bika you should need. Amrabaya hachi kama b'chein stam gina. The same. This is what the Mishnah seems to say according to Abaye. A stam gina. When we're talking about a gina, we're talking about a stam gina. By a stam gina, you have to build. But in a bika, which is less likely that you have to build, over there, it's only if it's a makom shenagu ligda. But stam, you would not have to. Amalei Rava, in kain my aval. What does it mean, aval bebika? It's not saying aval bebika. We're saying bebika is you are mechayiv. Ela amar Rava haktan v'chein stam gina kimakam shenagu ligdadami says a stam gina is considered a makom shenagu ligda. It's always going to need a get. Mechayiv I say aval stam bika kimakam shaloi nagu dami ve'em mechayiv I say. But a stam bika is considered like a makom shaloi nagu, and therefore you're not mechayiv. So we said in the places like a bika, where minastam a person doesn't have to build a wall, means if they agree to divide it, there's no hezekriya, and there's no reason to require a wall. And generally the din would be that you don't have to build a wall. But if one of the people decides he wants a wall, what he does is he builds it on his own rishus, with his own stones, and he makes a siman on it so that in the future they should realize that it's all his. He makes a chazis. The chazis is the siman. My chazis, Amar Rav Huna, achve le'lekarna leva. When you build a wall out of stones, you make like an outcropping on the top, facing toward the other person's property. Why does he make this outcropping toward the outside to show that it's his? He built the wall himself. Let him make it toward himself. Because the problem is if he builds like that, then in 20 years they see it's about to fall down. The other guy will make a little outcropping on the other side near him. He'll have access to that because it's on his side, and therefore he'll be able to keep the stones when it falls down within a year. Then he'll say that it was split. So if you're worried that the guy will build a little outcropping to double the siman, so therefore we're saying you put the outcropping on toward the other person's side, toward the outside, he'll cut off that outcropping. So no, if you cut it off, the piece sticking out, that's recognizable, and that won't work. People will realize that you messed around with it. Michva lekarna miligav. Huna says no. You push it. You make the the top of the wall stick out toward the inside. So if the Marvin Nevid Milabar, why didn't you make it to the outside? Guys lechavri, his friend will cut it off. But will say that it's split. The same way you're worried about that you make it toward the inside in order that the friend shouldn't cut it off, he's gonna add it on to the he'll add it on to his side, to the outside, and he'll say it's both of them. So if he's going to add it on later, an extra outcropping, that is recognizable. Listen, it's basically the inverse of the previous pshat. That we said before that you do it, before we said you stick it out to the outside. Now we're saying you stick it out toward the inside. But the problem is the Mishnah said you make the chazas mibachutz. So how could you say that that means that you bend it toward the inside? That's not what the Mishnah said. But the Gemara kasha. You have a good kasha on this pshat. Yochanan Amar Nishaya ba'amsa milabar. Let him, instead of doing this siman of bending out the wall, he says, Rabbi Yochanan says, you don't have to do that. All you have to do is make it discolored. You paint on it like a cement, a plaster of lime on the for one arm on the top of the wall. So the Gemara of an avid milgav, what does it do it on the inside? Avid chaver milabar. The problem is if you do it on the inside, then the friend, the other person who wants to make believe that he contributed to the wall, he'll slap it on the outside as well. Say that we both contributed. Now that you put it on the outside, maybe the friend will scrape it off and he'll be able to say that there's no siman and it belongs to both of us. Kilufa mediyadi, scraping it off will be recognizable. Hutza, what about, we said before, there was one, we said that the Hakol Kamidik Hamadina comes to add a wall made out of hutza, made out of branches and palm fronds. So if you made a wall out of hutza, how do you make a siman on that? You bend over the tips of the lulavim that you're using to block the view. You bend it out to the outside. So the make it on the inside. If you do that, he'll make also on the outside. Now that you put it on the inside, you put it on the outside, he'll cut them off. So the Gemara says, on this you can't tell that it's cut off, but it says what you do is you put on like a cement covering so that it's also in addition to bending over the tips. So he'll scrape it off. That you could tell if it's scraped off. Abaye says, no, you're right. This is a problem because if you bend over the tips, it's going to whatchamacallit? You're able to cut it off, and I guess he held that putting the cement on it is not really going to work either. It's not going to stick. So therefore, or you could scrape it off without it be recognizable. See if it says the only eight is to write a star. Have your friend when you put up the wall in the first place, write a star that you put it up all by yourself. But if the wall was built through both of them, you put a siman on each side of the wall. Why do you put a siman on both sides and say that they divided in half? Let's not put a siman at all, just like you normally do when they both contribute, and then you'll also have a siman. We're talking about with one of the person already put a siman on his side, meaning facing out. He'll say just mine. Because there was already one siman. So the Mishnah is saying if one guy put up a siman, then you have to put up a matching siman. Correct the Gemara. What's the Aleph? Amalei v'tana takanta l'ramoi. Is our Mishnah telling us what to do if one guy's trying to cheat by putting up a siman when they both contributed to the wall, and one guy puts up a siman to show that it's his? So the Mishnah is saying, well, you should put up a siman as well. Why are we dealing with this strange case of somebody who's lying? Why would we discuss that? Amalei said, what are you talking about? If the guy is trusted, why can't you just why do you need a simon in the first place? The fact that we say you need a simon is because we're scared the other guy's gonna lie. Now it's a strange question because I would say that over there, in the case where you built it by yourself, maybe he'll die and the other guy will die, and no one's gonna know what happened in the past. It's not a ramoy, it's for a possibility of confusion. Amalei, yeah. Amalei, but in any case, Gemara asked it. Amalei bishlam areisha tana dino misham dina tana takanta. First, we have to tell you the din that once they agree to split, you have to put up a wall. And once you're putting up a wall, if one in a case where one of them puts up a wall without the other one, so you have to tell you that what do you do on that case that you put up a sin? Elaseifa dina katani. Elaseifa dina katani. The katani takanta. We're not telling you any din that you also have to say what to do if there's a ramoy in that case. Amar Ravina hacha b'chutzi askina. Ravina says no. There really is a halacha that you're telling us. They're telling you that you can even build it with chutzi. Lafuke midabai, and saying not like abayid amal chutzi less like the kantel b'shtora kamash malon the b'chaz sagya. He's coming to say that even by chutzi there is a takana that you can make that you could put in a. You can put in a chazas, you can put in a sign, whatever the case may be. There's a disagreement about what sign is going to work. You make the bent over lovin, but that's what the Sefer is coming to tell you. What time is it? 10:44. I think we can do another 5 minutes if you don't mind. Someone who surrounded his friend, right? Ruvain has a property in middle, and Shimon has the three sides to the. Let's say to the north and the east and the west, he has properties surrounding him. The Gadar is Harishayna, and Shimon, who's surrounding Ruvain, put Gedarim all around Ruvain. Vesashniya, Vesashlish, all three of the properties. And he actually owns the south as well. But he didn't do anything on it. Ein Mechayiv. We're not Mechayiv Ruvain to contribute toward these fences, even though Shimon put up all the fences at his own expense, but he hasn't provided anything to Ruvain. It hasn't helped him. I mean, as we'll see exactly what the machlokes of the Mishnah is. Rabbi Yosi says he disagrees with the Tanakama. He says if you add the fourth wall, then so it's the whole Mishnah, every part of the Mishnah can be understood in a lot of different ways. So we're going to just go through the Gemara and see how it understands what the machlokes is and what the case is. Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shmuel. Tell me, by the way, if you're going to be available tomorrow morning, we can probably add this on to tomorrow's block because it's not Shlom block. But if you have another 5-10 minutes, I would do it now. So you good for another 5-10 minutes?
I'm good.
Great. Okay. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel. Halacha Rabbi Yosi the Amar im Amar the Gadosh Avias Magagon Lovas Hakoil. The halacha is like Rabbi Yosi, who says that if the fourth wall is closed off, the fourth side is closed off, then the whole thing gets put on him. That the guy, that Ruvain has to pay as Hakoil. Loishna Amad Mikaf, Loishna Amad Makaf, and it doesn't make a difference whether it's Ruvain who did the fourth wall or Shimon who did the fourth wall. At that point, once Shimon does the fourth wall, then it's fully enclosed Ruvain, so his field is protected from all four sides, and therefore Ruvain's going to have to chip in half of the wall. So Rav Huna Amar Hakol Lefi Ma Shegada. Rav Huna says when we say that Ruvain has to chip in, it means whatever it was that Shimon built. If Shimon built a 50-foot high fence made out of marble that's cost 50 times what a fence has to be, he has to chip in whatever he built. Chia Barav says no, he only has to chip in the cost of the cheapest type of fence. So the Gemara says no. So that's the machlokes between Rav Huna and Rav Chia Barav. Now the Gemara is going to go back to what was the machlokes in the Mishnah, which we still haven't really clarified. It's not. Hamaka has chaver mishal shu koisa v'gadol shushayna v'shniya v'tashlishus em mechayven. The Tanna Kama in our Mishnah said, if Shimon closed in 3 sides around Reuven, you're not mechayev Reuven to pay anything. Ha-revius, but if he added the 4th mechayven, you are mechayev. It's mashma that once the 4th wall is added in, then Reuven does have to pay. Ema sefer Rabbi Yossi Yomim Abad v'Gadol Servius Magagun Lavas HaKol. You add on the whole thing. So Bishlam Rav Huna Amar Kolafi Masha Gada. According to Rav Huna, that says that Reuven has to pay for whatever type of fence Shimon had put in once he's mechoyev when the 4th wall is added. Then we'll understand what the machlekes between Tanna Kama and Rabbi Yossi is. Tanna Kama Savar Hakol Lafi Demei Konim Bezoil. Tanna Kama just said when the first 3 he doesn't have to pay. When the 4th is done, he does have to pay. Reuben has to pay, but he only has to pay for the cost of a fence, of a bare fence, not anything more than that. Demei Konim Bezoil inu Mashagad Aloi. Rabbi Yossi Savar Hakol Lafi Mashagad. Rabbi Yossi said Megalgan Lavas HaKol. Megalgan Lavas HaKol means to say that you're mechayev Reuven when the 4th wall is built to pay for the entire thing, whatever it cost. It doesn't not just the bare fence, but this super luxury security fence. So that makes sense according to the Tanna Kama. The Amoira Rav Huna, who said that our Mishnah, the din of the Rav Yossi was that he says Magagan Lavas HaKol means to pay kafi what he built. And that's what Tanna Kama is disagreeing with. Elachia Barav, the Amar HaKol Lafi to make Konim Bezoil. He had understood that Rabbi Yossi was saying that all he has to build is all Reuven has to pay is kafi, a cheap fence. Ma'ika ben Tanna Kama Rabbi Yossi. What was the Tanna Kama disagreeing? The Tanna Kama also said that he has to pay once the 4th wall is built. So how is that different to Rabbi Yossi, who said when you build the 4th, you have to build the Demei Konim Bezoil, and that's what Tanna Kama said when you build the 4th, you have to pay Demei Konim Bezoil. Either Konim Bezoil loika yavle, ma'ika yavle. If he's not paying him to make Konim Bezoil, we say the Tanna Kama is disagreeing, he doesn't have to pay that. There's nothing less than that. So the Gemara is going to say a few different terutzim according to Rav Chia bar Abba about what the machlokes is between Rabbi Yossi and Tanna Kama. Iva Yisemer Agar Natira Kabena. No, there actually is something cheaper. Meaning that the Rabbi Yossi who said Magad and Lavas HaKol, he's being machmer. He's saying you have to pay to make Konim Bezoil a cheap fence. But the Tanna Kama who said once you build the 4th wall, then he has to chip in, doesn't mean he has to chip in for a fence. He has to chip in the cost of a watchman, which is much cheaper than a fence. So he only has to pay for once he's getting the benefit of having his field being watched, he has to pay what he would have had to pay to have a watchman. So Iboy say Aganatira Kabana. Tanakama Sava Aganatira in the make Konim Bezoil loy. Rabbi Yossi Sava to make Konim Bezoil that you even have to pay to make Konim Bezoil. That's the first thing. So Iboy say Ma Rishayna Shniya Shlishas Ikabeinayu. The question is about the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd wall. Tanakama Sava Raviyasu the Yavle. He only has to pay once he already had once Shimon built the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd wall, and Reuven is not required to pay for it. So now that's already done. It's a special halacha. Once something is done, we don't revisit it. So now, even if Shimon goes ahead and builds the 4th wall, at that point, Reuven is off the hook for the first 3, but now he's getting the benefit that he finished the wall, so then he has to chip in for the 4th wall. He doesn't have to pay for the first 3. Rabbi Yossi says, it means all 4 of the walls Reuven has to chip in. The difference is going to be who built this last wall. The Tanakama side, by the time of the Amad Nikif, it's only if the Reuven, who is the person on the inside, who's benefiting, if he builds the 4th wall, so he indicates that he wants it, then he has to pay for the whole thing. But on the other hand, if it was the other person, Shimon, who built the 4th wall, then like we said before, Reuven's only have to pay for the 4th wall since he was already absolved for the first 3 walls. For Rabbi Yossi, So all these pshatim are saying that Rabbi Yossi was being machmer and saying that you have to pay a little bit more than you would have to pay according to the Tanakama. Now we have a Lishna Achrino which says the other way around. Lishna Achrino, Makaf and Nikaf Ikabeinayim. The difference is going to be where it's going to be whether Reuven or Shimon, whether the person who was being surrounded or the one who was being makif, the other one was the one who built it. Tanakama sabim godem makif eseravius. Nami yovli. If the makif, meaning Shimon, was the one who did the fourth ruach, then Shimon, then Reuven is going to have to pay for all four of them, since he's getting a hana from all four of them. It's only if the person who's being surrounded, Reuven built it, so he's showing that he really wanted all four of the fences, then he has to pay for it. But if he doesn't show that, if Shimon was the one who built the fourth, so Reuven never showed that he wanted it, then he's going to be potter. So Megalon of Asakal is saying the other way around, that he's makel as opposed to the other Tana. Okay, we'll stop over here. Hashem Hey and Aleph. We'll start tomorrow. Is anyone any different preference as far as time tomorrow, or regular 8:30 is good?
Regular works for me.
How about you, Menachem?
Doesn't make a difference. I'm not sure if I'll see.
Okay. Very good.
Shkoyach. Kavach.
Because